Hello everybody! This is a sequel video to my video on waffle permutations, and what I want to do in this video is to show you a more concise way of notating the solution path, that is the sequence of 10 transpositions that we use to solve this waffle puzzle. If you didn't watch the first video, I recommend watching that first so you understand a lot of the notation I'm using as well as the rules of the puzzle. So the thing I will remind you here is that we're given this 5x5 grid. We want to rearrange the letters through a sequence of transpositions, which just means we swap two of the letters around. And at the end, we're going to get 6 words. And in fact, I've already solved the puzzle for today. And there it is. Okay, so the trick here, right, is, well, first you have to solve the puzzle, in the sense you need to know what the words are, right? And this video doesn't tell you how to do that. That's still an open puzzle every day. However, there's a second half, which is you want to try to rearrange the letters within exactly 10 swaps. Now, they give you up to 15, but right, we want to be champions. And champions do it in exactly 10 swaps. So yesterday's video, or the day before, whenever I posted it, it showed you how to denote the change by writing down these empty positions as numbers 1 through 14 or 15, depending on how many of these unknown positions there are, and then writing down the permutations in terms of those unknown numbers. And that is fine, except now you have like a third grid you have to worry about. So what I want to do here is to write down those permutations, not using numbers, but actually using the letters that show up in these grids. So that'll take one of the steps out of this process. And then after I show you how we get the sequence of 10 moves, I'm going to show you an even better sequence of 10 moves. Better in the sense that it's going to be easier for you to actually apply when you go to wafflegame.net and actually want to use these transpositions that you get. Okay, so but step one, let's write down a solution. And the way I'm going to do it here is by first noting that I have some duplicate letters. A doesn't duplicate, B doesn't duplicate, but C does. So there's a C1 and then there's a C2, and those are all the C's. And let's see, now the E's. Now, mind you, I'm only counting the non-greens, right? Those are fixed. I don't worry about those. But let's see, we have an E1, and then we have an E2. And let's see, then we have H. How many H's? It looks like we have 2 H's. So I have an H1, and I have an H2. And how about O's? Yes, we have an O1, and we have an O2. And from what I can tell, that's all of the duplicate letters. Oh, nope, we missed the T, right? Okay, T1 and T2. Okay, so these are the identical letters T, but they're different tiles, right? And so I want to keep track of those, so I'm going to denote things with an index. Okay, so well, why don't we start, I don't know, with this C1. Where does the C1 go? Okay, and now here we have some options, right? Because there's 2 C's, so we can either send it over to the C in Retch or into the C in Botch. And then we don't really care which one it is, but let's say I move it over here to the C in Retch. That's the S position. So C1 is going to go to S. Okay, I'll underline it so I keep track of what I've used up there. All right, now where does the S go? Well, the S could go to torso. That's in the T2 position. Okay, where does T2 go? Well, let's see. How about into the T and other? That's E2. Okay, how about E2? That it could go into, no, not there. Here we go. It could go into the E and ether, so that's H2. All right, H2, let's see, that could go into the H and other. That's the O2 position. O2, let's see, that could go to the H1 position in Botch. Okay, H1, let's see, that could go into the O1 position in ether. Okay, O1, that could go to the O in torso, which would be the B position. B, that's going to go into table, so that's the T1 position. T1, let's see, now that could go into the ether, that's be the R position. R, that could go into retch, that's the C2 position. And C2, that could go into botch, that's the A position. And let's see, A, that could go into the A in table. That's the C1 position. C1, that's what we started with. Okay, have we gotten everything? Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't think that's enough because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we're missing a couple. Well, let's see. When we did the C1, we didn't underline the E1 or the L, right? And in fact, you can see those just swapped with each other. So E1 and L. Okay. Now, we saw last time that the issue was we were going to get too many sometimes, and we could count, right? If we split these up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 transpositions. That's too many. However, we have this trick for splitting things up based on duplicate letters, right? So even though here we have like a C1 and a C2, they're indexed differently. We know they represent the same letter. And so our trick was to move this C1 down to the end, and we can rewrite this. So we have S, T2, E2, H2, O2, H1, O1, B, T1, R. Here comes the C2, which is going to close things up, and then we have A, C1. Okay, and then I still have this E1L that I'm not going to copy. All right, and by doing that, we were able to decrease the number of transpositions by 1. But we need to get rid of more, and that's easy to do because, again, we have duplication. So for instance, here I have a T2 and a T1. So I'm going to move this T2 so that it moves to the end. Okay, so that means I need to move both the S and the T2. So I have E2, H2, O2, H1, O1, B, T1, I'll close off. And then I have R, C2, and I moved the S and the T2 to the end. Okay, and I'm not going to copy the AC1. All right, well, I've decreased the number of transpositions by 1 again, but I can do more because, oh, look, I have another duplicate, these H's. So I'm going to move this E2, H2 to the end of this 7 cycle. So I get O2, H1. Okay, I'll close it off at H1. O1, B, T1, now the E2, H2 get moved to the end. And again, I'm not going to copy the other one. All right, now let's count how many transpositions I would need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Perfect. So we can write down now a winning combination, O2H, O1B, BT1, T1E2, E2H, RC2, C2S, ST2, AC1, and E1L. Okay, so this is a winning combination. Okay, that's the good news. What's the bad news? The bad news is when we try to apply this permutation and we don't have the numbering, we actually are going to find things get a little tricky. Okay, so let's head over to wafflegame.net and take a look. Okay, so here we go. We see the original puzzle, and I want to apply the sequence of 10 transpositions. Remember I'm going to go from right to left because this is a composition of functions. The first one says to swap E1 and L. Now there were 2 E's. I labeled this one as E1. This one down here is E2. There's the only L. So I do that swap. No problem. Okay, next it says I have to swap A and C1. All right, well, there's my C1. There's my A, no problem. Next, I need to swap S and T2. All right, so let's see. So here's my first T, there's my second one. So there's T2 and S. There's the S. Okay, the next one is I need to swap S and C2. The issue here is I'm no longer swapping the letter S, I'm swapping position S, right? And remember, the S started where this T is now. So I have to now keep in my brain that I'm not swapping with the letter S, which is already fixed, but actually with this position S. So S and C2. Okay, so where's the C2? So this is getting harder to keep track of. I think we had a C up at the top. Yeah, so then, well, this is the only C left, so that better be C2. So I guess I can swap that. Okay, then I need to do R with C2. Okay, but my C got moved. My C2 came from there. There's my R. Okay, then I need to do H and E2. All right. That must be E2. It's the only one left. And there's an H. Oh, which one? It was H. Oh, my goodness, when I wrote it down, I didn't copy it. Yeah, it must be H2, right? So that's not the right one. That's got to be it, H2. Okay, then we need to do T1 and E2. So there's the T1 and, okay, E2. Where did the E come from? The E was down here, I think. So we got to go there. We'll swap those. Then I have to do B with T1. So the T1, I think we just moved it from there. So you can swap those two. Then I need to do O1 and B. All right, so O1 and B, I think that's right. And then O2 and H. Oh, goodness. Whew. Okay, so I was able to do it, but I feel bad. Why? Because I had to stretch my brain, and I don't want to have to stretch my brain here, right? The point of this should make it more automatic. All right. So let's go back, and I'm going to show you a different way that we could have written down these transpositions that would actually make it easier to keep track of what it is we're doing. Okay, so before I move on, let me just add in the indices that seem to not get written down the first time. Okay, cool. So that's my OCD going on there. Okay, so what I want to do is rewrite this original permutation in a form that's going to make it easier for me to read off from the transpositions what I actually have to do when I'm playing Waffle. So I'm going to go down to the last step before we broke these up. So we had O2H1, then we have O1B, T1, E2, H2, and then we have R, C2, S, T2, and then we do have a couple of transpositions that we won't have to mess with, the AC1 and the E1L. Okay, now, last video, I showed you this trick where you have something like A, B, C, D. You can break this up as AB, BC, CD. However, there's another way of writing a cycle as a product of transpositions, which is you take AD, AC, AB. So I keep the A, the first term, always in each transposition, and then I just write these in reverse order. So the D, then the C, then the B. And we can check that this actually gives us the same thing. So if A, let's see, where does A go? A goes to B, so yep, A goes to B. Where does B go? B goes to A goes to C, so B goes to C. Where does C go? C goes to A goes to D, so C goes to D. And where does D go? Well, D goes to A. Hey, perfect. Okay, so we have another way of doing it. So what I could do is take this 5 cycle and this 4 cycle, and I could break them up in a slightly different way. It turns out that, well, that's fine, but it's not going to be as helpful as first applying the inverse. So what is that going to mean here? So when you have a bunch of permutations, so let's say you have something like a sigma, and then a rho, and then a tau, and it doesn't matter how many I have, and I take the inverse, what I do is I reverse the order, and I invert each one of them. Now, the inverse of a transposition, that just means what does it take to undo a transposition? Well, it's actually itself. So when I invert any of these transpositions, it doesn't change anything. All right, so if sigma, rho, tau are transpositions, then sigma, rho, tau inverse is just going to be tau, rho, sigma. You don't have to put inverses because the inverses equal the permutations themselves. Okay, so what I want to do is invert this AD, AC, AB. All right, so if I have AD, I have AC, and I have AB, and I invert it, all it's going to do is reverse the order. So I'd get AB, AC, AD. Okay. And so, once again, I'm going to be writing down a different permutation. It's going to look very similar, but it's not actually equal to this permutation. But it will have the desired effect of solving the puzzle. So I'm going to rewrite this now as O2H1. Okay, nothing special there, but here comes the stuff, right? O1B, and then O1T1, and then O1E2, and then O1H2. So all I'm doing is taking this first letter and then pairing it one by one with each of the other letters in the cycle. All right, I'll do the same thing with this fourth cycle here. So RC2, RS, and then RT2. And then I can keep the AC1 and the E1L. All right, and so what I claim is that this product of 10 transpositions, okay, double check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, beautiful, is not only going to solve the puzzle, but it's going to solve it in a way where we don't have to keep track of where things started. We only have to keep track of where things are. All right, so let's jump over to Waffle Game. We'll solve the puzzle again, and I'll show you how this works. Okay, so here we are back at our puzzle, and what we're going to do now is apply these transpositions again from right to left, and all I'll have to do is follow the letters that I'm seeing in the transposition, not where the original position of those letters was. All right, so we'll first start with E1 and L. Okay, so there's my first E, and I'll swap with the L. And then I go to A with C1. Okay, well there's my C1, there's my A. Next I have R with T2. All right, there's my R, there's my second T. Swap those. All right, now this is where before we had to keep track of stuff. Now we don't. It says to swap R with S. So I'm just going to swap this R with the S. Okay, next R with C2. Cool, there's R. Where's my C2? Well, that's the only C I have left. That better be my C2. All right, O1 with H2. Okay, well I have two H's. There's my H2. There's my O. All right, now O1 with E2. Okay, there's my O1. E2, that's going to be down here. Okay, then it was O1 with T1. Okay, there's T1. And then O1 with B. Okay, O1 with B. And then finally O2 with H1. Look at that. I didn't have to keep track of where these things started. I just had to, at worst, keep track of which is my number one, which is my number two. All right. So this is going to be a much easier way when you solve the puzzle to write it down so that you can translate it back to actually, solving the puzzle online. All right. If you have any ideas on how to improve this, leave some messages in the comment section. Look forward to hearing from you.